Okay, welcome everyone to Monday Night Team Call. Hope everyone's doing well. I am Brittany Lamphere, Ruby Ambassador. For those of you that don't know me or new faces on here, I'm excited to be talking to you tonight about CBD, which is kind of all the rage right now. And we're excited about this. Our family's actually leaving for San Diego for Leaders Retreat tomorrow, and we're going to spend a few days there before Leaders Retreat gets started, but I'm expecting some kind of announcement about our new hemp CBD product. I don't know if it'll be released this week or if we'll just get an announcement that of a future launch date or whatever, but we've had samples rolling out over the summer, and our family has gotten a couple bottles of that and been able to try that. So I'm really excited about this, and it was something that was really new to me, and I've been doing some research on, so I'm just excited to share some of that with you guys. And some of what I've learned about how complementary a CBD product like what we're getting from Plexus is going to be to our existing product lineup, and kind of how to think about that as you start approaching prospects about it in the near future. So I'm going to start with a little bit of foundational stuff. Will be review for some of our veterans, but it's always good, even just writing my notes for this, like going back to it. I think we get so caught up in so many things in our businesses that it's easy to go back and forget how transformational some of this health stuff is. So with Plexus, we talk about three really interconnected areas that are really foundational to our health. I'm going to put this in speaker. Okay, so some three areas that are really foundational to our health. So blood sugar, inflammation, and gut health. So we'll often use that acronym that it's a big deal, because these three areas, they really all touch each other. So not one of them lives in isolation where we're just dealing with this. Each one is interconnected, and so it's really helpful to kind of understand why and how that is. So I'm going to just touch on each of the three and what it impacts and why it's important, and then we'll talk about CBD and what it is and how it impacts these three areas as well. So the first one, blood sugar. Blood sugar balance is critically important. Before Plexus, I probably thought that this wasn't important for anyone who didn't have diabetes or pre-diabetes or anything like that. It was not something, I kind of generally knew that if you're trying to lose weight, you shouldn't let your blood sugar crash and get super hungry. You should try to eat small meals throughout the day. I think a lot of us who were health-minded or who had ever tried to lose baby weight were kind of aware of that. But I didn't really understand why that was necessarily. I thought it was just, don't let yourself get too hungry so that you don't overeat. But really, blood sugar is controlled by insulin. Insulin is a hormone secreted by our pancreas. And it really plays a huge role in all of the chemical signaling within our body. It's considered a master hormone, which means it talks to all of our other hormones. The other hormones talk back too. So sometimes we can kind of forget that insulin's talking to them, but those hormones talk back to our insulin as well. And so insulin plays a really critical role in balancing all of the hormones and all of the chemical signaling pathways within our body. Of course, it has a lot to do with removing excess sugar from the blood and pulling it into the cells and all of that kind of stuff. But one of the things, and one of the reasons that we talk about blood sugar balance, even for prospects or ourselves that have no weight loss goals, why this is still important, is because of that hormonal signaling. And a lot of us, even if weight is not our primary issue, run into issues where our hormones just get kind of out of whack. So you kind of think about thyroid hormones, reproductive hormones, so our estrogen, our progesterone, things like that, our monthly cycle. As women, our hunger and our satiety, so the signaling within our brain of, hey, am I hungry, am I full, and the healthy response within our body to recognize those kind of things, as well as stress, which are controlled by our adrenals and our endocrine, which is part of our endocrine system. So our cortisol and our adrenaline, the way that our body responds to stress in the world is really controlled by those hormones. And that in particular, that system, when we're in, I don't know anyone who doesn't have a busy, stressful life out there, but when we're under persistent stress, which I think as moms, we fall to a lot, that signaling pathway can get really, really messed up, and it can lead to a whole lot of issues coming from that. And one of the reasons that that's so important is that cortisol, that primary stress hormone that's secreted by the adrenals, plays a really huge role in inflammatory signaling without the body, in kicking in that inflammatory response. And so balancing that process allows our body to have a healthier response to stress. And if we can have a healthier response to stress, it in turn helps our body keep inflammation in check. So that's kind of blood sugar balance. It's all about the hormones. It's all about helping our body signal the other systems appropriately, and all of our hormones talk to each other in a healthy, balanced fashion because it's one of those signaling hormones. Now with inflammation, I'm going to talk about gut health first. I'm going to go out of order with the acronym. It kind of bothers me, but I'm going to go with gut health next. Okay, so that's blood sugar balance. Now let's talk about gut health. Gut health is so important, and our skin, or our gut microbiome is so important because other than our skin, our gut is the largest barrier we have between us and the outside world. So if you think of everything that we ingest, anything that doesn't touch our skin that has the opportunity to get into our body is coming in through this gut pathway. So between our mouth and where it comes out the other end, everything from the outside world is touching our gut microbiome and our gut system and that digestive system. And that's why it's so important. It really is. We don't necessarily think about it, or I didn't think about it before Plexus. We don't think about it as being that front line of defense, again, between us and the outside world. And that's why it's so, so important. Most of us know in here that the gut is made up of trillions of microorganisms, and they play a really key role in interacting with those substances that come into contact with our body, how they impact us, how we react to them. Do we have an allergic kind of overreaction to them? Do they, put us in more of an inflammatory state? All these kind of things. It's how our body interacts with the world around us that those microbes in our gut really influence. I love this quote. I'm going to read a couple quotes here from, this is my favorite book on gut health that I read pretty early in my Plexus journey. It's called Brain Maker. It's by Dr. David Perlmutter, who is a neurosurgeon. And that book was really the one that kind of took it to the whole gut health thing to the next level for me. Once I kind of started looking at Plexus and learning about gut health, I was like, okay, maybe this could help me drop some baby weight and help me with these stomach aches I've dealt with for, 2 decades. This is kind of the book that took it to that level of, these are some things that run in my family. These are things that are, kind of we're seen in family members as they age in my family. This could really help me support my body in a way that could protect me against some of these future more significant problems, and understanding why that comes from and why, these issues that don't seem related that run in our family, they could really all come back to gut health. And so I love a quote from this book. Talking about gut health, he said, "It is now undeniable that our intestinal microorganisms participate in a wide variety of physiological actions, including immune system functioning, detoxification, inflammation, neurotransmitter and vitamin production, nutrient absorption, signaling being hungry and full, and utilizing carbohydrates and fat for fuel. All of these processes factor mightily into whether we experience allergies, asthma, ADHD, cancer, diabetes, and dementia. The microbiome affects our mood, libido, metabolism, immunity, and even our perception of the world and the clarity of our thoughts. It helps determine whether we are fat or thin, energetic or lethargic. But simply everything about our gut health, how we feel both physically and emotionally, hinges on the state of our microbiome. Is it healthy and dominated by so-called friendly beneficial bacteria, or is it sick and overrun by bad unfriendly bacteria?" So in a nutshell, I think that's a great sums up, and I can copy and paste this quote into the comments here in a second, so that if anyone wants to copy that. But I love that quote. I think it really sums up what all of this is about and how far-reaching the implications of this are for our health. And so where our gut is unhealthy and where inflammation exists, the gut will become permeable, and it will allow some of those foreign substances that we're talking about, stuff from our outside world, it allows that to get into our bloodstream. It's called leaky gut syndrome. And it can really dangerously inhibit our gut's ability for that detoxification process, that ability to get foreign invaders eliminated from our body, and for our immune system to function properly, for it to signal appropriately to us. And so one of the other things that I think is so interesting about these gut microbes, that I learned in that same book, is that our gut bacteria actually have the ability to change the expression of our genes. Kind of like an on-off switch. So certain microbes can essentially turn off the part of maybe your DNA or your genetic makeup that give you a propensity for heart disease or for dementia or for certain types of cancer. And so, of course, this isn't just like a magic thing. It happened in isolation. But what they found, especially in lab testing with rats, is that they can take rats that are kind of bred with this very specific genetic makeup and are kind of these germ-free creatures. And when they introduce certain types of bacteria, it will turn off or on the expression of certain genetic factors that they're kind of bred for. And so, I mean, so crazy interesting. But many of us have our gut balance disrupted by medication, by diet, by lifestyle choices, by stress, different things like that. And so our gut can get really disrupted in that way. And the third factor we'll talk about is inflammation. And inflammation, when it comes down to it, systemic chronic inflammation is really the #1 indicator of chronic disease. There's a difference. So there's acute inflammation. That's like, hey, I sprained my ankle and it's going to swell up and get red as all these white blood cells rush to that spot and nutrients rush to that spot to help heal and protect our body in that case. The body senses something's been damaged. The tissues swell up kind of as like padding, kind of to protect that area as it's healing. That's a really good, healthy response in our body. So really, that acute inflammation is a healthy protective function in our body. But what's problematic is chronic inflammation, which has become increasingly common in our, very fast-paced modern society. And so this is where your body is kind of signaling that it is in danger, that it is under stress, that it needs protection, and it can't turn off that signaling. And so all of our tissues kind of lived in this puffed up, inflamed state, trying to protect our body from this impending danger that's coming toward us that never shows up and is really just a byproduct of our lifestyle. And that can be incredibly detrimental to our health. And those white blood cells that are looking for something to protect can start to attack healthy tissue like our gut lining, like our arteries and our connective tissue and our neural tissue. And another quote that I love from that book is he says, the 2 key mechanisms that lead to brain degeneration are chronic inflammation and the action of free radicals, which are, for now, you can think of as byproducts of inflammation that cause the body to rust. So when you hear about oxidative stress, that's what he's talking about, the rust. So when we say systemic chronic inflammation can lead to oxidative stress, it's where the cells are constantly under attack from this inflammation in these white blood cells. And again, it kind of starts to act as rust. Our cells start to kind of degenerate. And that is what can lead to all of these degenerative disorders, to free radicals that ultimately break down and damage cells, leading to cancer and different things like that. And so, again, just really interesting stuff. I also thought it was interesting that in this book, again, I was just going through it. I haven't read it in a few years, but I was going through and looking at all my highlighting, which is practically every page. But he says that Alzheimer's is so prevalent in people with type 2 diabetes that some scientists have started calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, because it's the next stage of that persistent disordered hormones leading to systemic inflammation that gets worse and worse and worse until the cells attack themselves and degenerate to the point that our neural tissues break down. And so I thought that was incredibly interesting, but it shows this cycle and how destructive it is. And it also shows how, again, tightly inflammation is bound to our hormonal signaling and the healthiness of that process, and also to our gut health, and how if the gut is not healthy and we're sending bad stuff into our system, our inflammatory markers are going to come to the rescue and try to protect us from that, leading to that oxidative stress in the body. So again, I just think it's, every time I come back to this stuff, I'm like, this is so fascinating that this is how our bodies work, and that we can really help give them support, and that we have such amazing tools in Plexus to give them support with the products that we have. And so again, just all three are interconnected and talk to each other and matter. An unhealthy microbiome can mess up our hormones. Again, like that quote I gave, how it impacts metabolism and impacts all these different areas. So again, none of them exist in isolation. It's not like we can say, oh, we just need to treat the inflammation, or we just need to treat the gut, or any of those. They all matter and they all work together to bring us into aligned health. And so, of course, Plexus has really laid that as the foundation for all of our product line to some extent. So you think about the triplex and how that is foundational to all three of these things, but also MetaBurn with its adaptogenic herbs and other ingredients like that really helps with that stress signaling as well. So it kind of, again, some additional support with hormone regulation. Balance helps, again, it gives, some additional support for insulin sensitivity, gives some support for your thyroid hormones. Ease works to really help bring down some of that inflammation in the body. even X factor, helping build up the immune response and helping the body absorb more vitamins so that the tissues can be healthier and stronger. So I love all of that stuff. And that's why I've been on Plexus for 3 years, and why I will tell anyone who will listen about Plexus, because that stuff matters so, so much for our health long-term and our short-term quality of life. And I think that's amazing. And so now I want to talk about CBD, or hemp oil, which is something that a couple months ago I knew nothing about. And I've been learning about, because whenever Plexus introduces something new, I find myself like being like, yay! But then like I can't really get excited about it until I understand how it all works within what we're already doing and how it's going to work into my routine and how it's going to help me. And, you know, with CBD, I live in Colorado. So those of you that don't know, I live in Denver, Colorado. And I've lived here for 12 years, and I have never once ever tried marijuana in my entire life. And so, but the weed culture is very, very prevalent here since, you know, really it's always has been. It's become more so since it was legalized here. It's hard to walk outside in certain parts of town without smelling it. My kids think that Denver's overrun with skunks every time, you know, we'll go out someplace and be like, Mom, that skunk is out here again. So it's a very big part of the culture here in Denver, which I've done my best to really stay away from. I'm a CPA. I've done my best to stay away from it professionally. I really haven't engaged with businesses that are in that industry. So I've just kind of had all of that at very much arm's length and not really ever wanted to engage with all of that. And so when CBD started popping up everywhere, and it is everywhere here, like in every grocery store. I mean, it's like you can't go anywhere here without seeing signs for it everywhere. Every dispensary has a sign up about it. When I started seeing this, I really just, again, once I started seeing it in grocery stores, I was like, well, that's probably not pot. But I just kind of lumped it all in with that culture that I was very resistant to, until Plexus announced, I want to say late April, that they were looking at getting into this space. And I have a ton of trust in Plexus. I know they don't do anything that isn't on the up and up. They don't do anything that they don't do well, you know? And so I was like, it kind of sparked my interest. And I was like, let me start kind of learning about this. And then, you know, that they spoke to us about it at convention. And so I've just kind of slowly but surely kind of been, you know, reading an article here and there, kind of learning about it. And so I thought I would just share a little bit of that kind of backstory on what it is, and then how it works and how it interplays with those areas of our health that I've already talked about. So now hemp, and the type of CBD that we're talking about here is hemp-derived CBD. Hemp is a plant that is in the marijuana family. So it's in the cannabis family, but it is not the same plant that is marijuana. So this is not derived from weed. It is derived from a family member of weed that is very, very different in its chemical profile and how it's made up. Hemp has been used since at least 8,000 BC for rope, clothing, jewelry, paper, as well as nutrition and medicinal purposes. That goes back to ancient times that cultures have used that for its medicinal properties. It contains compounds, chemical compounds called cannabinoids. Did not know how to pronounce that word until convention, by the way. Cannabinoids. And these are natural compounds that interact with a vast network of cannabinoid receptors in our body. And this is called and referred to as our endocannabinoid system, or our ECS. I'm going to say that ECS from now on, so I don't have to keep pronouncing that word. Okay, and so these cannabinoids, our body has a vast network of these. They are in our brain, our GI tract, our nervous system, our glands, our skin, our immune system, our connective tissue. And these receptors and these cannabinoids, our body produces cannabinoids naturally. There are cannabinoids in breast milk. Our body does produce these naturally. And these receptors with these cannabinoids are like a lock and a key for helping the body regulate these different systems that I'm talking about. And so now marijuana has two primary cannabinoids in its chemical profile. And the first one is THC, and that's the psychoactive component that binds to these receptors and produces the high effect that most of us associate with that substance. CBD, which is cannabinoid, I still can't say that word. Okay, CBD is also in marijuana, but it is not the component that produces the high. And cannabinoid is also derived from hemp. Hemp, again, same family, but different plant, has only very small trace amounts of THC. So it does not have any psychoactive effects. but it has this CBD component, as well as hemp has a lot of other cannabinoids in it that bind these receptors in our brain, and based off of the research that's coming out, have very extensive health benefits. And so it's really exciting stuff. CBD is kind of what probiotics were 5, 6, 10 years ago in terms of all this research that's coming out. There's a lot of money going into researching this, and so it seems like there's a study coming out every month on the benefits and the potential implications of the use of these therapeutically. And so it's really exciting stuff. Now, again, just like with our gut, yes, in an ideal world, we would produce the exact right balance of cannabinoids naturally in our body, and we would have a healthy gut, and we would never encounter environmental pollutants and stress and over-the-counter medications and all these things that get our body out of whack. Of course, in an ideal world, that would be the case. But most of us who are on this call have at least made peace with the fact that that's not been the case for us. It's at least not been the case for us, and that there's benefit to then using supplementation to help fill those gaps in our body that we might not otherwise be getting in our normal modern day lifestyle. And so, again, I just think that this is really cool. I think the fact that we have this vast network of receptors in our body that respond to this stuff is enough for those, I think to get a lot of our attention, that God has made our body to receive this type of stuff and to respond in a way that could really benefit us. And that is naturally occurring stuff, that we're not putting chemicals and stuff made in, artificial stuff in our bodies. So I think it's worth looking at there. And this is a quote from one of the articles I was reading. It says, CBD works by balancing and supporting the ECS, so that endocannabinoid system, through its subtle effect on our CB1 and CB2 receptors. So again, we have receptors in all these different systems of our body that I mentioned. Most of them are called CB1 and CB2, as well as other receptors that modulate serotonin, GABA, dopamine, and many that impact behavior and inflammation. It helps us respond to stress by modulating the endocrine system, regulating our fight or flight stress response, and supporting a healthy inflammation and immune response. Do any of those words sound familiar in terms of what I just talked about and how those things are such a focus for us here at Plexus? That these things work with those receptors to further aid our ability in that healthy immune response, healthy inflammation response, healthy hormone response. That's really powerful stuff right there. So let's talk a little bit about the research that's coming out on each of these areas. I'll talk about CBD and gut health. So research is showing that there's actually a very strong link between our microbiome and our ECS. So these studies have shown that CBD may help increase the number of beneficial microbes in our gut, as well as inhibit undesirable strains that would compromise the gut barrier function. It may strengthen gut barrier function. And so one study showed that it had promise not only for preventing damage to that intestinal lining, but also for repairing and promoting a healthy gut barrier for those of us that have a damaged gut barrier. In vitro studies, which are these studies they do in labs where they have made these test tubes that mimic our microbiome. Plexus has done a lot of their testing on their products in vitro studies. Those studies showed that CBD helped reduce gut permeability and also reduce temporary inflammation in the gut. They also show promise for just healthy digestion in general. They seem to improve overactive motility. So our friends that really struggle with IBS and a overactive, where they're having diarrhea and a lot of pain related to that, as well as bloating, abdominal discomfort, poor appetite, and general GI upset. It's showing promise in all of those areas. So I think that that's really exciting, especially potentially for friends that tend to have a kind of a harsh reaction to the triplex initially, that this might be a new tool that we could offer to say, hey, this will help your body in terms of that type of response, help bring down that inflammation. You know how we've often recommended a loading dose of ease to help get the gut to a place where it could even absorb BioCleanse. CBD could be an incredible tool in line with that to help get their gut to a place where it could absorb some of those nutrients and they're not so disruptive to their very sensitive gut balance. Additionally, with hormone balance, like I said, the ECS is linked to our endocrine system, and these glands are very receptive. So the cannabinoid receptors in our endocrine system are very, very responsive to these cannabinoids. And so research has shown that it can help actively reduce cortisol levels. That's that stress hormone that I was talking about that's so key in that inflammatory signaling, that fight or flight response within our body. It appears to impact estrogen and female reproductive hormone functions. So in the future, it could have really interesting implications for fertility, for menopause treatments, things like that. It appears to modulate leptin and ghrelin, so those hunger hormones, in terms of, again, that proper signaling for hunger and satiety. It appears to impact serotonin production, and that's possibly through its role in the gut, because as many of us know, 85 to 90% of our serotonin is made in our gut. So through its impact on helping balance that gut microbiome, it can help boost serotonin production, which helps, is our happy hormone. And so it can have a powerful impact on mood. And I know many people that have used this as an alternative to antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, and really seen a powerful impact on their ability to modulate their mood through use of CBD and hemp. And then let's talk about inflammation. So I mentioned it earlier in that quote that the ECS is very intertwined with our body's ability to modulate that inflammatory response. And it appears, based on recent research, to have the ability to reduce oxidative stress, so the rust that we talked about on our cells, as a result of that constant onslaught of our inflammatory response. It has very powerful antioxidant properties. And so it can help combat those free radicals in our body. And it can also help block inflammatory pain signaling to the brain. And so you hear a lot of people talk about using CBD for pain management as a alternative to the opioids that are ravaging our country and the over-the-counter NSAIDs that are destroying our organs, and that it could be a really powerful in that respect as well. Another quote I read is, what we do know is that cannabinoids exert their observed anti-inflammatory effect through an induction of apoptosis, I don't know how to pronounce that word, which is the programmed death of abnormal or damaged cells. So damaged cells that can lead to cancer and other degenerative problems. It seems that CBD has the ability to start the process of actively destroying those damaged cells that could lead to that kind of stuff. It has as well as the inhibition of cellular proliferation and the suppression of cytokine production. And cytokines are proteins in our body that regulate our inflammatory response. So these cytokines, CBD can help stop them from proliferating, as well as regulate their response and how they signal pain and inflammation to the body, as well as the induction of T regulatory cells. So again, lots of big words, but exciting stuff to see that I want the primary takeaway to be here, that this is not something totally new that's like off over here, and we've got triplex and these things that we recommend, and then we might recommend CBD in certain cases for people just like so. But what I want you to see here is that this is so complementary to the things that we've already learned, to the things we're already talking to our prospects about. And it's a very powerful tool that is getting a lot of attention, not just in the marketplace. There's a huge market for it, I can tell you, by everywhere that I see it here in Colorado. I'm sure it's not, it's similar other places, but it's everywhere here in Colorado. There's a huge market for it, but it's also getting a ton of attention in the scientific community and the medical community and things like that. So I think that that's really exciting and makes me excited to see how we're able to, again, just fill people's toolbox with the things they need to achieve the health that they want to have. Yeah, so I really think after what I've read into it, I feel like it's I think there's enough out there to kind of make us feel like, hey, this is safe stuff, and there's enough we do know about it. It's kind of like probiotics and the microbiome. There's still tons that we don't know yet, and what the science will be in 20 years, we don't know. But I feel kind of similarly about CBD, that there's enough out there to support that, hey, this probably has some really good health benefits. And it's in all likelihood safe as long as it's coming from a reputable source, which is why I'm so happy now that we have it coming from a source that we already know, trust, and believe in Plexus. And we know that they wouldn't ever compromise their standards in terms of the ingredients that are going into this, the sourcing, the manufacturing standards. All of that is so important no matter what supplement you're talking about, and CBD is no different. And so I think that's where we can say, hey, we're going to be differentiated in the marketplace because I have no idea what's in that product that's on the, at the checkout stand at our local grocery store. I don't know where, they're getting it at from a dispensary or a head shop here in Denver, but I know that I trust Plexus. I know that I know what they're about and what their mission and their heart is, and I know that they will derive the best possible product to align with what we already offer here at Plexus. So as you start talking to your prospects and your team about this, I just wanted to help equip you with kind of that understanding of like how this all fits together. And so whether we have that product to offer people on Thursday or Friday, I guess it would be Friday, or it'll be maybe a couple months, that I think it's really exciting to kind of start educating yourself on how this all fits into the bigger picture of what we're already doing here. So I came in right at 30 minutes. Look at that. I didn't even practice this or time this. So I'm pretty happy that that came in. So, okay. Well, thank you guys for jumping on. We can jump over to Pink Power's call as well. Again, I'll copy, if you want to hang on here a second, I'll copy and paste a few of those quotes in case you wanted to grab them. But thank you so much, guys, for jumping on. And for those of you, if any of you that I get to see in San Diego this week, I cannot wait. See you soon.